And we have one final presentation now in this session. Also a student from Tsinghua University, Lancheng. And well, he will talk about MANRS that people should have, in particular when looking at route origin validation. So once the slides are up, let's see, your audience.
Yeah, okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Lancheng from Tsinghua University. I'm going to introduce my new work related to BGP security. So nowadays, AIS uses BGP to exchange their route information among different ASs and determine the best route to each destination prefix. However, BGP lacks security mechanisms. And now, BGP hijacking becomes one of the most important threats to today's internet. It's mostly used in traffic disruption, DDoS attacks, or stealing currencies. To mitigate BGP hijacking, many BGP security mechanisms have been proposed from both academia and industry. And to improve the deployment of BGP security mechanisms, the MANRS, supported by the Internet Society, proposes 4 actions for network operators. And the action 1 is related to BGP route filtering. It requires network operators to prevent the propagation of illegitimate BGP announcements from customers. So specifically, an AIS in the internet may have its provider AIS, its peer AIS, and its customer AIS. And for MANRS Action 1, it requires network operators must check whether the announcements of their customer AISs are correct. In other words, network operators should at least deploy route filtering at the interfaces facing customer ASs. So in this paper, we call this interface as customer interface. So now, network operators usually use IR-based validation or RPKI-based validation to perform route filtering. However, IR data may be inaccurate or outdated, so RPKI-based validation is more recommended to be used in reality. Here shows the architecture of RPKI. As we can see, is a hierarchical architecture that distributes and manages rules. The rule records prefix and the AS that is authorized to announce this prefix in BGP. And route origin validation, ROV, is the application of RPKI that validates BGP announcements by using rules. So it checks the prefix and origin AS in BGP announcement against rules recorded in RPKI database. Specifically, it will first check if there is a rule that covers prefix. If the result is no, the validity of this BGP announcement is unknown. And if the result is yes, it will then check whether the AS number of the rule matches the origin AS and whether the max length of the rule matches the prefix. If so, the validity result is valid, and otherwise, the validity result is invalid. And then RPKI valid and RPKI unknown prefixes will be propagated, but RPKI invalid prefixes should be dropped. We call this operation as RPKI invalid filtering. So nowadays, the rule deployment ratio reaches nearly 50% in the world. But how about ROV deployment? Recent researches show that more than 60% AS under test do not deploy ROV or just selectively deploy ROV at partial interfaces. For example, some ASs only perform RPKI invalid filtering on BGP announcement received from peer AS, but not from customer AS. That is not following the MANRS Action 1. So why? This work aims to answer the following questions. How about ROV deployment in the real world and network operators compliance to MANRS Action 1? Why are network operators not following MANRS Action 1? and how to promote further deployment of ROV. Okay, to answer the first question, we measure the prevalence of RPKI invalid prefixes that propagated through each AS. We collect BGP data from root views and ROV. We collect AS relationship information from CAIDA. And finally, we identify more than 1,000 ASs that have propagated RPKI invalid prefixes in June 2022. Moreover, we found more than 60% of these non-stop ASs are not compliant to MANRS Action 1. In other words, it means these non-stop ASs have propagated RPKI invalid prefixes from their customer ASs. We further measure the percentage for different classes of interfaces, including customer interface, provider interface, and peer interface that have accepted RPKI invalid prefixes. Furthermore, to fairly compare ASs with different routing complexity, we divide these ASs into large AS, medium AS, and small AS according to their AS size. And we can find different AS may adopt different deployment strategies. For example, small ASs may be more likely to perform RPKI invalid filtering at customer interfaces. And large ASs may be more likely to perform filtering at provider interfaces, but medium ASs may be more likely to perform filtering at peer interfaces. And then we present the first notification experiment to evaluate the impact on different notification on ROV remediation. In this experiment, as mentioned above, we have measured that we have identified more than 1,000 ASs that propagated RPKI invalid prefix. And then we randomly assign these ASs into 7 different treatment groups. And the first 6 groups will use different notification treatments. But the last group is set as a control group. And then we send notification messages to ASs in the first 6 groups with different notification treatments. But for ASs in the control group, we do nothing to them. And over the next period of time, we consistently identify which ASs remediate from non-deploying ROV to deploying ROV. And then we conduct a survival analysis based on our observation data. However, we found none of the treatments can significantly improve the remediation rate of ROV compared to the control group. So our measurement and notification experiment tell us some network operators are not following MANRS Action 1 to deploy ROV, even though they have received our notifications. So why? To answer the question and figure out the reasons, we conduct a survey among AS operators. First, we summarize the results of our measurement and notification experiment, and then we conduct interviews with 5 network operators from different countries. And then we design a questionnaire and send it to AS operators in the world and send the questionnaire on mailing list of several nodes. In this survey, we asked network operators about 6 main questions about their intentions to deploy ROV at different interfaces, such as provider interface, customer interface, or peer interface, and their reasons for not intending to deploy ROV at this interface, and problems when operating ROV, the effectiveness of MANRS, their priorities of deploying ROV at different interfaces, and their experiences or suggestions for implementing or operating ROV. So according to our survey results, we found non-compliant networks are mainly due to economical and technical reasons. Economical reasons include lack of time and effort, business conflict, limited router capability, and high operational overhead. In particular, as for the business conflict, some transit networks tell us their custom ASs do not want their announcement to be dropped. So they cannot deploy RPKI invalid filtering at customer interfaces. But as for technical reasons, they mainly include technical bugs in the ROV implementation and technical limitations of ROV mechanism. For example, some tells us that they think ROV may drop legitimate BGP announcement due to incomplete or inaccurate rules. And in addition, they think ROV depends on upstream filtering. It means if your network deploys ROV, but your upstream network doesn't deploy ROV, your traffic will still be hijacked. And besides, someone tells us they think ROV is still vulnerable to BGP path hijacking. So they believe ROV can only provide partial protection. So to address these problems and promote further deployment of ROV, we make some practical recommendations for deployment. As mentioned above, our measurement finds different ASs may take different deployment strategies. And since it's difficult to perform RPKI invalid filtering at all interfaces simultaneously, partial filtering is common in the early days of ROV deployment. And the MANRS Action 1 suggests to first deploy ROV, or at least deploy ROV at customer interfaces. But is it the best deployment strategy? To answer this question, we conduct extensive simulations in internet scale and to measure the effectiveness of deploying ROV at different interfaces. And we found ROV at provider interfaces can work better in preventing the propagation of RPKI invalid prefixes than ROV at other kinds of interfaces. And in addition, for transit networks, deploying ROV at provider interfaces will not conflict with the business conflict between their customers. So in summary, we suggest that operators could first deploy ROV at provider interfaces as the first step, and then deploy at customer interfaces, and finally peer interface. We also provide some recommendations for backup and purchasing according to our survey results. As for the backup recommendation, we suggest to increase the geographic diversity and the software diversity of ROV deployment. For example, you can deploy to 2 different data centers or use 2 different code bases. And for purchasing, we conduct market research among equipment vendors, and we provide a vendor support list for ROV implementation. So in conclusion, we first identify, we first measure understand the ROV deployment in the real world and the networks complies to MANRS by measurement and notification experiment, and then we try to figure out the reasons for not following MANRS Action 1 by interviews and survey among AS operators, and then we provide some practical recommendations that can improve the deployment of ROV. We hope this work would motivate more non-deploying networks to deploy ROV, at least deploy partial filtering in the future. Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Right, let's thank the speaker. As usual, the microphone is there if you have questions. I'll quickly get started. Why would there even be any announcements all the time that you can measure that violate the ROAs, right? Is there constant BGP hijacking going on, or are these misconfigurations?
Yeah, it's maybe some is due to BGP hijacking and some is due to misconfiguration, but we cannot distinguish it. But we all use the rules. We identify if it's RPKI invalid and valid.
Right, thanks. Question there?
Hi, thank you very much. the data that you use, the measurement that you use to identify is it first of all available, the data you use to identify the ROV adoption and deployment, is it available?
Sorry, can you speak loudly?
Yes, I'm asking if the data of ROV adoption that you've found, is it available?
Yeah, we collect the BGP data from root views and rock price, and then we collect the ROAS from public API database to validate whether it is API valid, API unknown, or API invalid.
I'm asking if your measurements of ROV deployment are they available so we can compare, and did you compare to other ROV deployment measurements?
Oh, well.
But let's begin with
yeah,
the first part.
I see.
Is it available?
Yeah, we only measure whether the AS have propagated API invalid prefix. We do not measure whether the AS has deployed ROV using existing ROV measurement methods. Yeah, so we didn't do that.
You just measured for existing announced ROAs. You didn't do active experiments. Is this what you're saying?
Yeah, we just measure whether AS have propagated API invalid prefix. Yeah, we don't do further research on ROV measurement.
So, but from that you concluded that ROV is deployed or not deployed, right? From the customer of that AS, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, we use AS relationship from CAIDA to identify whether the prefix is sent from customer.
Customer.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you saw AS pass with the customer, you concluded that ROV is not deployed, right? With an invalid ROA. Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, and are your results available?
Sorry?
Are the results of your measurement, are they available so we can look at them?
Sorry.
So I think actually it's the CAIDA data plus
The
the
CAIDA data is the user for the relationships.
Yeah, but I think from what I understood is that there is essentially there are public lists of these
Announcements.
ROAs.
Sure, but these are the measurements they use. They compare particular data. So usually we make this available, maybe not. I don't know. I'm just asking if they're available.
I think it's just public data sets that they were using. But again, I'm not the author of the paper. So
Right.
Yes, CAIDA data is public. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, Eddie Treuer from KO Leuven. I have a question about the survey. Here I am. I have a question about the survey that you conducted. Were there also the surveyed subjects, were they also customers or only network operators?
So the customer?
who did you send the survey to? Was it just the big operators that got the survey, or also to the customers?
We conduct a survey. We identify about 1,000 ASs that have propagated API invalid prefix, but we send the questionnaire to those ASs to ask if they deploy API invalid filtering at different interfaces.
Did you also include any question on the adoption of clean slate approaches that use something else than BGP?
Some BGP.
Yes. Do you have the survey as part of the paper in the appendix? Of
Yeah.
the paper?
You can find the survey details in the paper.
So maybe you can check there. And final question over there.
It's Cameron Morris from the University of Connecticut. Thank you for the talk. I was wondering about the simulations. Is the code for the simulations available?
Yeah, so the simulation?
Yes, the simulations, I saw this, the graphs a few slides back.
Yeah, the simulation, we conduct this simulation. I can present some details here. We first built the internet topology by using Kaita topology. And then we randomly select one AS to let it announce API invalid prefix. And we compute how many ASs will be polluted. And then we select some ASICs to deploy our way at different kinds of interfaces. And then we compute how many ASICs will not be polluted. And then we can compute the reduction ratio. And the reduction ratio can reflect the effectiveness of our way deployment.
Thank you. Is the code available?